All right, buckle up, everyone, because we are diving into some seriously cool stuff today. We're talking ancient texts, the kind that makes history come alive. And guess what? Researchers have made a discovery that is seriously blowing everyone's minds. We're talking about the Herculaneum scrolls, the only library that survived from the ancient world, buried by Mount Vesuvius way back in 79 CE. It's like a time capsule, right?
Oh, absolutely. Packed with all sorts of knowledge from the Roman Empire, stuff we might not even be able to imagine. And what's really fascinating about these scrolls is that the intense heat from the eruption actually carbonized them. So they're unbelievably fragile, almost like, lumps of charcoal. For centuries, scholars basically thought, nope, these are unreadable, forget it.
Huh.
But recently, there's been this breakthrough that's changing everything.
Okay, so spill the tea. What kind of breakthrough are we talking about here?
Well, get this. Researchers have actually managed to decipher a whole word from one of these scrolls. And here's the kicker. They did it without even opening it.
Wait, hold up. How is that even possible? I mean, I always thought those scrolls were so delicate that just, breathing on them wrong could turn them to dust.
You're totally right. And that's why this discovery is so mind-blowing. But to really understand how he did it, we need to go back a bit, like a detective story almost. Decades of research, tons of technological innovation, all building up to this moment.
All right, lead the way, detective. Take us back to the beginning. Where did this whole thing start?
So it all began back in 2002.
Mm-hmm.
That's when this idea of virtual unwrapping popped up, using X-ray technology. Imagine, it's like using a high-tech 3D scanner to peel back those layers of the scroll digitally without ever actually physically, touching it.
Whoa, that sounds straight out of a sci-fi movie. So how did they go from the aha moment to actually seeing inside those scrolls?
Well, by 2009, they were creating the first 3D images of those Herculaneum scrolls, revealing these incredibly complex, tangled layers. It was a huge step for sure, but still a long way off from actually deciphering that text hidden inside,
Oh, yeah. I can only imagine trying to make sense of those images. It'd be like, trying to solve a jigsaw puzzle where all the pieces are like burnt toast.
Right.
So what happened next?
There's this really big turning point in 2016. They managed to use that virtual unwrapping technique to read text from a different ancient scroll. This one's called the NGI scroll. And it proved, hey, this technology actually works. It can unlock these secrets that have been hidden for centuries.
So they knew it could be done. But the Herculaneum scrolls, those were the final boss level, right?
Exactly. You see, the ink they used in the Herculaneum scrolls, it was different. Mostly carbon, which is basically invisible to those standard X-ray images. Talk about a challenge.
Yeah, that's like trying to read a ghost story written in disappearing ink. So how did they get past that? Sounds like they needed a whole new approach.
Well, and they found it through artificial intelligence. In 2019, they developed a neural network. It's like an AI that can learn to spot those super subtle patterns of the carbon ink hidden within the scroll layers.
Whoa, they taught a computer to see what humans couldn't? That's wild. So did that directly lead to figuring out that first word?
It was a giant leap, definitely. Developing that AI really kick-started a ton of excitement and investment, which ultimately brought us to the Vusuvius Challenge in 2023.
Oh, yeah, the Vusuvius Challenge, $1 million prize, all about pushing those breakthroughs even further. This is where things get really interesting, wouldn't you say?
Absolutely. Imagine this. Global competition, over 1,000 teams, all racing to solve this ancient puzzle. Professor Brent Seals, the guy behind it all, called it a global hackathon for ancient texts.
Okay, that paints a picture for sure.
Mm-hmm.
So what was the Vusuvius Challenge aiming for? What were these teams trying to do?
The challenge, it was to decipher 4 specific passages from the inner layers of those scrolls, and they had to do it by the end of 2023. They were given access to Seals software, cutting-edge stuff, and thousands of those 3D X-ray images to work with.
Wow, that's a tall order. So did anyone actually manage to crack those passages?
Well, they didn't decode the entire passages. But the progress has been amazing. And one team, they actually did it. They deciphered a whole word.
Profrock.
That's going to need a translation. What does that even mean, and how did they figure that out?
It means purple dye. Or purple clothes. And you might be surprised to hear that this was a really big deal in Roman society. Purple dye, it was super expensive back then, extracted from sea snails, and it was a symbol of wealth and power.
Wait, you're telling me that one word about purple dye could actually be a game
You
changer?
better believe it. And we'll get into why that is right after
Oh,
this.
come on. You can't leave us hanging like that. All right, fine. We'll be right back after this break to find out why purple is such a big deal in the world of ancient Roman scrolls. Don't go anywhere.
We'll be right back.
All right, you got me hooked. So you're saying that this one word, purple, could actually, like, unlock all these secrets about Roman society. It really could, you know? You think about it, purple dye, back in Roman times, it wasn't just a color. It was like this huge status symbol. I mean, it was crazy expensive, super rare. Only like the top dogs, the wealthiest, most powerful people, they could even afford to wear purple.
So you're saying this single word could give us clues about Roman trade, their fashion, even their whole social hierarchy, right?
Exactly. It's like this tiny key that opens up this massive door to a whole new understanding of Roman culture.
Okay, I'm starting to see why everyone's freaking out about this, but before we get too ahead of ourselves, who actually made this discovery? Who are these people who, like, cracked the code on this impossible thing?
Well, it's actually a pretty interesting team. The word purple was deciphered by two contestants in the Vesuvius challenge. Remember that? Luke Ferreter, he was a 21-year-old intern at SpaceX.
Wow, SpaceX.
And Yusuf Nader, a grad student studying biorobotics.
A SpaceX intern and a biorobotics student. That's like the ultimate brains and beauty combo. What were they like when they realized they found something?
Oh, I bet they were ecstatic. Ferreter said it was like this late-night whoa moment. He was up working on it. And Nader said it felt like, looking through a window into the past.
I can only imagine that feeling. Seeing that word just like pop out of the digital reconstruction, knowing you're the first person to read it in centuries.
Must have been incredible.
But let's not forget the OG, the man behind it all, Professor Brent Seals. He's been working on this for, over 2 decades, right?
Yeah, he's dedicated, that's for sure. Professor Seals, he's a computer scientist at the University of Kentucky. And you could say he's a little obsessed with these scrolls. In a good way, of course.
I mean, wouldn't you be?
He's the one who pioneered that whole concept of virtual unwrapping. Spent his whole career developing the technology to make it happen.
Sounds like he's not just a brilliant scientist, but like a total visionary, too.
Yeah.
So what else can you tell me about his work?
Well, the amazing thing about Professor Seals is he always believed in technology, that it could really unlock the past. Like back in 2005, when virtual unwrapping was just this, crazy idea, he already saw it, using it to read the Herculaneum scrolls.
So even way back then, he had this vision of cracking open these unreadable texts. Pretty cool. So what happened next?
Years of work. That's what happened. Refining the technology, working with all sorts of experts, and of course, getting the funding for this huge project. In 2009, him and his team, they went to the Institut de France to get those first ever 3D images of the Herculaneum scrolls.
That must have been such a historic moment, seeing those intricate layers for the first time, knowing that, hey, they could actually hold the key to rewriting history.
Oh yeah, a major milestone. But it also showed them just how complex this whole thing was going to be. These scrolls, they weren't just fragile, they were super dense, all tangled up, making that whole digital unwrapping process insanely difficult.
Yeah, I can only imagine the amount of data they had to deal with. Did they even have the computing power back then to handle all that?
Not really, at least not at first. But Professor Seals, he didn't give up. In 2013, he teamed up with, get this, Google's Cultural Institute.
No way, Google.
Yeah, they needed some serious firepower. They used Google's advanced computing, all that infrastructure, to process those massive data sets from the 3D scans.
So this was already turning into this massive team effort. So what were some of the other big moments that led to the breakthrough we're talking about today?
Okay, well, one of the most important things was the creation of the Volume Cartographer in 2016. It's a software program that totally changed the game. It allowed them to map those individual layers within the scrolls. Like, imagine peeling back an onion layer by layer.
That does sound like a game changer. Did they have any instant wins with this new software?
You bet. That same year, 2016, they used the Volume Cartographer, along with virtual unwrapping, to read text from another ancient scroll. The Ngidi scroll, it was thought to be unreadable too. And the success, it really proved that their tech could work on all sorts of historical text.
The momentum was building. But you mentioned earlier that the ink in the Herculaneum scrolls was a big problem, right? So how did they finally get past that?
Right, so the ink they used, It was carbon-based, basically invisible in those X-ray images, like trying to read, I don't know, a faded message on a burnt piece of wood.
So they had the tech to unwrap the scrolls, but they couldn't even see what was written. Talk about frustrating.
Oh, a major roadblock for sure. But they didn't quit. In 2019, they turned to, you guessed it, artificial intelligence.
AI saves the day again.
Pretty much. They built this neural network, a type of AI specifically designed to recognize those super faint traces of carbon ink.
So they basically taught a computer to see what human eyes couldn't. How long did it take to, create this AI?
Well, it wasn't easy. Tons of data, tons of computing power, but by 2019, boom, breakthrough. Their AI was able to pick out those patterns of carbon ink within the scrolls, and that paved the way for finding that word purple and all the possibilities it holds.
It's incredible how persistent Professor Seals and his team have been. But it's not all about the tech, right? It's about bringing the right people together.
Couldn't have done it without that collaboration.
And that's where the Vusuvius Challenge really shines, right?
Exactly.
I mean, a global competition, a big prize, you're basically incentivizing the best minds in the world to work together on this.
It's like a giant think tank for ancient texts.
Smart move. So tell me more about the challenge itself. How did it actually work?
So they gave everyone access to Professor Seal's software, all that good stuff, plus thousands of high-resolution 3D images of the scrolls. And they created this platform for everyone to work together, share their ideas. The goal, decipher those 4 passages by the end of 2023.
And we know one team found purple, but what about the other passages? Any other big discoveries come out of that?
Well, they haven't fully deciphered those 4 passages yet, but the progress has been awesome. Teams are still working on their algorithms, making them better all the time. It's amazing to see what humans can do when they put their minds together, And the technology, it's just blowing the doors off what we thought was possible.
Yeah, it feels like we're on the edge of a whole new era of historical discovery. But with all this focus on technology and all that, it's easy to forget about the people, the people whose lives are, right there in those scrolls.
Oh, absolutely.
What can you tell us about them?
Well, it's important to remember that these scrolls, they weren't just written by famous philosophers or emperors. We're talking everyday Romans, merchants, artisans, slaves, even kids.
Wow. Kids, too.
Yeah, their stories, their thoughts, everything.
It's all captured in those little pieces of papyrus. That's amazing to think about. It's like we have this connection to these people across thousands of years.
A direct link to the past.
And now, because of this incredible technology, we actually have a chance to hear their stories.
Who knows what we'll find?
Right. It's like opening a time capsule that's been buried for centuries. And this is just the beginning. What's next for the Herculaneum scrolls and this whole technology? I need to know.
Yeah, it feels like we're just scratching the surface here. I mean, potential discoveries we've talked about, it's mind-blowing. But I'm curious, beyond the Herculaneum scrolls themselves, what about this technology? Can it be used on other ancient texts, other mysteries waiting to be solved?
Oh, absolutely. In fact, that's one of the most exciting things about this whole project, the techniques they developed to read these scrolls. It's a game changer for all of archaeology and historical research.
So it's bigger than just these few hundred scrolls. We could be talking about unlocking a whole new era of historical understanding, right?
Exactly. Think about it. There are tons of damaged, unreadable texts just sitting in museums and libraries all over the world.
Just waiting to be read.
Imagine reading scrolls from ancient Egypt or lost plays from classical Greece, even early Christian texts. Stuff that could totally change how we understand religion. The possibilities are endless. It's like a whole new world of knowledge is opening up. But for now, let's focus on the Herculaneum scrolls. What are the next steps? What's happening now?
Well, the Vusuvius Challenge, it's still going strong. Those teams are really pushing the limits of AI and 3D imaging. The big goal, read all 600 scrolls, of course.
Yeah.
But even just deciphering a few more passages would be huge.
Yeah, it's a long process, very meticulous, but the rewards, they're massive. And, amidst all the excitement about the tech and the discoveries, it's important to remember the people at the heart of it all, the people whose lives are literally in those scrolls.
You're so right.
So tell me about them.
Well, like we said, these scrolls weren't just written by big-shot philosophers or emperors. These were everyday Romans, merchants, artisans, slaves, even children.
It's incredible to think about. Their stories, their thoughts, their hopes and dreams, it's all there.
Preserved in those fragile pieces of papyrus.
And it makes you realize these people weren't so different from us.
They had families, they fell in love, they struggled, they celebrated.
And now, because of this amazing technology, we have this chance to actually hear their stories.
It really is like traveling back in time. experiencing Roman life through their eyes.
So as we wrap up this deep dive, I want to turn it over to you, the listener. What does this discovery mean to you?
What really speaks to you about this whole story?
Is it the power of technology? The relentless curiosity of humans? Or maybe it's the possibility of rediscovering lost knowledge, lost voices.
Maybe it's even something else entirely.
Maybe it's the realization that the past isn't as far away as we think.
And those who came before us, they're still connected to us in ways we're just starting to understand.
Whatever it is for you, one thing's for sure, this is just the beginning. The deep dive continues.